let's move to the Brandon Clarke of it all.
Sure.
Brandon Clarke signs a 4-year, $52 million extension. Seems like a reasonable deal to me across the board, right? Like Brandon Clarke is a valuable player. He is now going to be starting, it seems like, for the Memphis Grizzlies while Jaren Jackson is out. He's been productive in the minutes he's played. He is a switchable defender who can do a lot of different things, although I don't think he's quite been as good defensively as some people like myself, Cole Zwicker, when he was on the show, kind of thought he would be. I thought he would be just like utterly elite defensively, and he's just like good on that end. But he is very effective offensively, has the funky floater game, has real rim running ability. There's a lot to like about Brandon Clarke, and this deal just kind of makes sense. 4 years, 52 million. This is what the going rate is for guys like this, it feels like.
Yep, very much so. And again, another one of those deals where we're going to look back in 2, maybe 3 years once that cap takes another rise and say, man, that's a real bargain for a high-end role player like him. So I have no problem with Memphis starting to lock up that core. I know we're talking a lot from the team perspective here, Sam. So the one thing moving forward is Memphis has a ton of these younger guys that are going to be coming due for their own payday in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So wondering how much money they're going to be able to set aside and save for every single one of them is always going to be something that they have to budget well in advance. But I don't think that this is a domino that's going to prevent something else from falling down the line. It's not large enough of a deal financially. And quite frankly, it's good value at a position that they need. The last thing that the Grizzlies are going to want is for Jaren Jackson to be out for the start of the year, Brandon Clarke to blow up, and now all of a sudden that paycheck he's due in July is going to be a hell of a lot larger. So I think the timing was right on Memphis's part to lock this in now.
What have you thought of Brandon Clarke's development thus far in his career?
So I wasn't as big of a fan as guys like you and Cole were coming out of the draft. I had some severe.
By the way, like I had him like late lottery. Cole had him like top 5 or 6 in that class.
Yeah, and I
remember correctly.
I think I had him in the mid 20s. I want to say mid to late 20s. So I was a little bit lower than that even.
Yeah.
Solid role player in a lot of different regards. I struggle sometimes with trying to anticipate. I think the NBA has been a lot more 4 out, 1 in, if not 5 out at times over the past. So playing 2 bigger guys who I think are questionable shooters in some regard or best served as screen and roll, rim running, energy type of bigger bodies. I think playing a lot of them is challenging to do at the same time. But I think Clarke has been very, very solid and dependable on the defensive end of the floor and has created a niche for himself on offense, as you talked about with that floater, that kind of mid-range game where I have really no problem with him being a rotational guy on a good team.
So with the Grizzlies, it's worth noting in terms of their cap sheet, they have extended Steven Adams at like right around $12.6 million per year. They've now extended Brandon Clarke on a contract that I would imagine, with the way that their cap sheet is kind of listed essentially, or the way it's like formulated, that they'll have that be an escalating contract and it'll start around like 11.5 to 12 million for next season. So they've taken off like $24 million of potential space that they could have had next summer. They could have actually been like pretty real players in free agency. And look, like you can get off of money if you have to, you can sign and trade guys. Salary cap space is like almost like a construct now. Like you can figure out different ways to make what you need to work, right? But at the end of the day, this is just kind of, it's interesting that they are committing to this young core, but it's not surprising given everything we know about the Memphis Grizzlies and what they're about at this point. They really like their young guys. They really trust their developmental culture. They really trust their identification of talent, and they really trust their identification of human beings, I think, as well, that fit together in terms of being just high level character guys. And Brandon Clarke's another one of those guys, right? Yep. Like there's no reason to not buy into this moving forward.
Yep. And Clarke, he may be best served being more of a bench defender, like energy type of guy that plays more against second units. I worry a little bit more in Memphis about him and Steven Adams sharing the floor together. I think, and it seems like Memphis has done this a little bit, starting Santi Aldama, the pride of Loyola University, from right down the road, a
Yeah.
little bit more in that Jaren Jackson spot. I think that's more sensical rotation to me. But I understand that Clarke is much more farther along in his NBA development than a guy like Aldama. I would expect him to see
Yeah.
plenty of minutes early on.
Yeah, I want to shout out Jason Crawford in the comments on YouTube for noting that Santi has been starting. End of the day, like
Jason.
I think Brandon Clarke's going to close games while Jaren Jackson's
Yeah.
out.
Yep.
I'm not real worried about like, you know, the starting versus closing kind of thing. Like I think that closing is more important, I guess. Brandon will be their like key front court piece until Jaren comes back. And there's a chance that within these next 2 months, we see this as a contract that is a real discount, I think, moving forward.
Yep. Yep. And it's also going to set the tone for what a lot of future kind of, bench guys are going to be getting on their rookie extensions moving into this next salary cap.